Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. I see few more folks are joining in. We'll give them everyone a couple more minutes to settle down. We'll resume shortly. So good morning, good evening, and good evenings, everyone for who have joined us. Thank you for joining us. This webinar is on dynamic endpoint protection for virtual environments, brought to you by Citrix Ready. This is part of the Citrix Ready technical webinar series. I am your host, Sagnik Datta, and I'm the technical marketing lead at Citrix Ready. I'll be your moderator and one of the speakers in today's webinar. Also joining with me are the fantastic folks from Morphisec. We have Tom Bain, he's the Vice President on Marketing, and Yuval Danili, he's the Vice President in Customer Services. So before we get started, couple of housekeeping items. There for question and answers, please click. You have a panel there, so go ahead and ask your questions on the panel chat box. We will take your questions at the end of the session, and the presentation will be shared. The recording will be shared after 24 hours to your registered email ID. The agenda we'll be covering today, the news. We'll start with the new Citrix security approach of how Citrix SDP story is. We'll talk a little bit about Citrix Ready, and then we will dive into who is Morphisec and why Morphisec matters to Citrix customers, and share a couple of joint customer studies and demo, and then to the call to action. So before we get, so to start the Citrix SDP story, to give you a background, the work as we see today is distributed. Users are working from anywhere. This could be branch offices, remote locations like home, hotel, or anywhere, not only the corporate offices. And they're using applications from on-prem, SaaS, or other web or cloud accesses, but still need to reach their traditional applications and services within the data center. Now, IT and networking professionals have to think the approach differently to tackle this kind of work distribution. And the point solutions available to deliver applications and content securely and reliably only adds to the complexity for IT. So we have these many solutions, and you can see to protect applications, data, network. These are a lot for an IT, for a single IT admin to consume. So like there's a survey that we conducted with Ponemon Institute in 2017 that found that 83% of the organizations survey 83% of businesses believe that complexity of their organization structures and IT infrastructure is putting their companies at even greater risk for security breaches. This is a huge business concern and the leading cybersecurity. And there are 3 points that I would want to cover on this as why cybersecurity is a huge concern. Now, one, the attackers with increased motivation are driven by the monetary value of attack. Like we have enterprises that average time to discover a breach can cross more than around 200 days. SMBs and consumers are targeted as are by ransomware, and this has become a very much news in the recent news. If you have been following the Pina attack or the ransomware other attacks that's been going on. And another concern with the organizations is that on the shortage of security experts and skills, there are more than 1 million unfilled security jobs, and more than 70% of the companies plan to increase the size of these security items by 15% or more. Uh, Lastly, the surface area is becoming too vast for traditional security approaches to remain effective. When everything is connected, security is everything, and there are many new ways of working, multiple users, because today's organization, today's users are working differently. There are multiple user locations, there are multiple devices that they access it from, and the data is stored across cloud or SaaS and so forth. And with complexity being the biggest enemy of security, a completely new approach is required. And this is another survey that said that confirms this finding, where 3/4 of the enterprises agree the need for a new security framework to address the threat of cybersecurity. Uh, this leads things like app and cloud sprawl, bring bio devices, IT complexity, and addition new attack vectors needs to all fit into this framework that we refer to, which is why Citrix is approaching security in a different way, from far from what was traditional. We are looking at a people-centric approach. So this would mean where like we start with the what, the digital workspace, and use its construct to define what should happen within it. So this defines the where. The next one is the applying the policy. So we are not instead of applying where, we talk about what to apply the policy on. Another, rather than forcing the user into discrete points where the security policy can be applied, uh, we we tend to follow the user wherever they are in the world of cloud, and the user can be everywhere. So we used to earlier focus on zones, trusted zones, and DMZ and intranet zones, and so forth. But what we do now is using a context. We know the user and their real-time interactions with the network applications and data to figure it out. And the lastly, we rather than relying on a vast number of doors and locks that attackers will probably break through anyway, we build a system of detectors that an attacker must evade. If one gets flagged, it's game over the other attackers. So this is the complexity is really hard to tame, but it's also where Citrix can help. And this is the security, the secure digital parameter that we talk about. And couple of points that we want to touch base here is on the unified experience that we provide. We allow single sign-on application. We give you a contextual access depending on what kind of devices you access your applications and data from. And for the IT admin, we give them a unified endpoint management console, and we give them content control and application operations. And so one thing, this is helps evolve from attack centric to dynamic people centric parameter security. So I will be discussing more. So why is SDP important? I want so with application sprawl, the network is critical to securely delivering applications, content, and workspaces. And through this approach, we are significantly expanding the Citrix networking offerings in a SaaS, hybrid, multi-cloud, and multi-device world, and thus enabling three things: simplified control, 360-degree visibility, and intelligent analytics. And with Citrix, this is a secure digital parameter. The benefits that we get from these three things are: one, the on-demand, people-centric, minimize attack surfaces, centralized policy control. From the 360 visibility, you get to get aggregated logs and flow. We get visible across SaaS, hybrid, and multi-cloud environments. And an IT admin could get these intelligent analytics such as contextual reactions and sharing, and can share intelligence across services. So in essential nutshell, I would say SDP can be broken down into 7 main benefits. One, contextual and secure access, mobility and device security, user security and malware protection, secure collaboration with content security and IP protection, and the compliance aspects and the business continuity, and not to forget the user behavior analytics that I talked about the previous slide. And with that also comes the endpoint security is also an essential piece. And as a Citrix, we recommend endpoint security that doesn't add to your IT complexity. It's built and optimized for VDI. It simplifies IT manageability, and it protects diverse technologies and workloads, and it maintains business continuity throughout. So essentially, we want you to stay in control so you have the freedom to innovate. And this is where Citrix Ready comes in. We are the #1 source to evaluate verified partner products for customers and making a Citrix purchase decision. We have showcased third-party applications and solutions and get them verified on the latest and the greatest version on Citrix, and showcase them on the Citrix Ready marketplace. So that's the marketplace link where you could get access to and visit all the applications that was verified with us. There are over 30,000 verifications to help you find a Citrix compatible product for your business. And if you want to understand more about the program, you could go to the second link here, which is partnerprogram/citrixready.html. I will now hand it over to Tom Bain from Morphisec to talk more and walk you through the Morphisec's offering and take it from here. Tom, over to you.
Sagnik, thank you very much. Very well done, and appreciate the introduction, and certainly the approach that that Citrix is taking as well too, to the overall ecosystem, right? Trying to improve computing, trying to take that next step into lowering costs and optimizing performance. So Morphisec maps right into that. So again, thank you very much. I'm Tom Bain, the VP of Marketing with Morphisec. I'm here to tell you a little bit today about Morphisec and why we're a truly different company that sits within actually a very completely undifferentiated industry, which is cybersecurity. From our seat, we feel we're fundamentally changing the way that protection is delivered, specifically mapping, as Sagnik pointed out, to the emergence of virtualized computing and the ecosystem that Citrix is delivering. Right, that itself is fundamentally changing the way that organizations compute. We came to market in beta in 2014. We delivered our product in 2016. We're venture-backed. We're based in Israel with US offices in Boston. Our technology was founded out of Ben Gurion University Cyber Labs. In just a few short years, really, we're currently deployed on over 600,000 endpoints on a global scale, which is big, right? Which is big for just a short amount of time in market, which shows how aggressive we are and how we're accelerating our business. From a high level, as I dig in a little bit more on who we are and what we do, simply stated, we protect customers against advanced threats that other cyber technology cannot. Second, we place a priority on architecting technology that's easy to use, easy to operationalize, and that doesn't force operators to spend a lot of time managing false positives, annoying alerts, white noise, and complex development cycles to get actually going with the tool. Third, and probably most importantly, as it maps to our presentation today, we're entirely aligned and integrated to provide a critical layer of additional threat prevention that really preserves the integrity of Citrix in terms of enhanced, optimized performance. It maps right into what Sagnik was talking about earlier, which is the secure digital perimeter. We can go to the next slide. So what problem are we solving? I think that so many times organizations forget to be able to articulate this, right? We're solving a massive problem that the majority of organizations globally can't, right? Remaining static in the wake of an advanced attack on your organization just isn't working, and we know this. Being more dynamic, being more adaptive, and more flexible is really the only way to defeat adversaries. Right? And you can see that Homeland Security supports this initiative that I'll dig into a little bit more about what makes us really different and what our IP is. So I'm here to tell you today a little bit more how we do it, and then Yuval Danieli, toward the end of my presentation, is here to show you exactly how we do that. We can go to the next slide. So attackers have not and will not stop innovating. How they attack, what methodologies they use, and the areas of the infrastructure that they attack. Recent Ponemon report shows that security executives state that almost half of the attacks that their security teams are facing are targeted specifically at the memory layer on the endpoint. Why is this? Well, it's where you go to find the most data on device. You're going to find a lot of cached data, and you're going to find passwords. You're going to find all types of PII, personally identifiable information. It's where you go. It's where the most data is. It's where the data is interacted with, and it's where the controls are typically weakest. Second thing on this slide that I wanted to point out, and we can confirm this with the majority of our customers, is that more than 3/4 of attacks include fileless malware, which means that teams haven't seen them. They don't contain any signatures. They don't contain any indicators. And they don't have a solution that detects or prevents them. In other words, these are zero-day attacks, and endpoints are where they're heading. This is where attackers are going, whether they inject at the browser level or not. And I think this is really indicative of the trend that we're seeing today, not just across our customers, but across the entire ecosystem of organizations, enterprise and mid-market. We can go to the next, which dovetails directly into, in my eyes, digital transformation. Right? The move to virtualized systems has been underway, right? And it's keeping security and IT personnel up at night. Why? Because there's a lot of unknown, right? There's a lot of unknown data, and when threats are unknown, people tend to get a little bit nervous. And you can build this out all the way. It's just a couple of builds. Right here, what we're seeing is a little bit of data coming back from a Gartner survey, where they asked security professionals what trends they felt carried the most uncertainty, right? And as you can see here, the overwhelming majority is that it's IT transformation, right? What this means is that technologies like virtual desktop infrastructure and the extension of the cloud into the enterprise, right? As that continues, with that comes a level of uncertainty as to what these threats will look like. Is it different than threats that exist for legacy physical environments? Sagnik pointed out earlier in the presentation, the new digital workplace, right, has a lot of demands, right? And there's a lot of built-in componentry into the fabric of the Citrix ecosystem, right? But there's third-party security considerations that need to come into play. What it means is there's more activity, there's more connectivity, there's more applications and more locations to protect across the IT ecosystem. It's growing in what I think is essentially a hybrid way. Get to the next. And for all the reasons that Sagnick has already pointed out, including increased performance and agility in the digital workplace, Morphisec understands exactly what IT teams need in terms of security partners across the virtualized ecosystem. This includes lower costs, increased performance, and more accessibility for one. However, from an operational standpoint, it's really critical for IT to be able to provision and to pool effectively in these environments. They don't need to worry about cumbersome cyber products that get in their way either. Unfortunately, this is the reputation that most cyber technology in the market, especially at the endpoint, has built for themselves. And I'm here to tell you a little bit more about why Morphisec is different. We can go to the next. Which brings me to the next point here, which is prevention versus detection. Prevention versus detection doesn't really have to be a holy war, but in the cybersecurity market, sometimes it is. Essentially, this can be, in some cases, based on how quickly a detection or a monitoring technology can identify an attack and or prevent it. Prevention, for Morphisec, what this means to us is that you do not let whatever is malicious execute, period. There's multiple ways to protect systems. And ESG Global, who conducts a substantial amount of cyber research, they recently polled a large sample size of security execs about what they plan to do relative to what we call next generation endpoint technology. You can build it out one more time, second. And what they did was they gave the execs a choice of what they felt they would prioritize bringing in terms of tools that focus on detection and response, additional controls like data leakage and NAC, and then finally advanced prevention, which would deliver a dedicated layer of protection that is targeted at preventing advanced attacks. And guess what? 80% of those security executives chose prevention. Why? Well, it's less work for a team to prevent attacks rather than hunt. And we'll get into that a little bit later in the slides here. But it becomes a no-brainer if you can deterministically prevent a higher percentage of advanced attacks, which dovetails right into the changing protection paradigm, as I call it here. So why such a rapid evolution in cybersecurity technology? Why has this evolution taken place? Well, sometimes it seems like there's enough innovation out there that should just work, right? Well, specifically at the endpoint, we start here with reactive prevention, which essentially is antivirus as a means of reacting to threats coming in. What this means is attacks hit, you react to them, you leverage existing signatures and blacklists to ensure that systems aren't impacted again, right? Because they might have already been impacted, you're just covering for some of the damage that's potentially already done. Then the industry moved to deception platforms, which essentially throw up smoke screens to would-be attackers. Simple fact of the matter is, those are limited, right? And diversion is just one technique, and in my eyes, it just buys time. Then, very quickly, the industry moved to detect and response solutions, right? This was the next cool thing. They do a great job, but the problem is they hog network performance, they introduce complexity into a process that doesn't need any more complexity, and they aren't natively architected to align with VDI. And other tools exist also that attempt to reduce the attack surface. If you could just go back one. Other tools exist that essentially reduce the attack surface, which are maybe complementary at best, right? Which brings me to this point here. Proactive prevention, right, is what Morphisec is doing in terms of changing the direction of the cyber market overall. I know it's kind of a big statement, but this really is the next generation of simply and easily preventing the very attacks that cause the most damage, right? And that seem to evade everything else that you see here across these four columns. So what does this mean? And you can move to the next slide now. What we realized is going back to the problem that we're solving for customers is that the industry has been about historically building a better mousetrap, building a bigger wall, trying to build a marginally better solution potentially that may or may not take a security team to that next level of defense. Further, by virtue of remaining in the same location and standing still, you're really not going to win a fist fight. You're not going to win a battle. And you know what? The war, if you think you're going to win the war, you might as well raise your white flag right now and surrender, right? And maybe just go ahead and pay the ransom that your attacker's demanding based on the ransomware attack that you got hit with. We see this, right? And we see this trend, and we know that we've got something totally different here. Moving target defense is our innovation, and it's a revolutionary new concept in cybersecurity. It essentially removes the attacker's advantage of just flat out being predictable. Morphisec has figured out a way to move assets around continuously and randomly within the memory to take back this advantage. In essence, if an attacker has a moving target and isn't trying to inject code into what he or she thinks is the memory application layer, the attack won't be successful. And that is the fundamental component of our innovation in moving target defense. So how does this actually work? You can go to the next slide. By the very nature of being static, as we said before, you're vulnerable, right? And what I want to do here is I just want to outline exactly how we're applying moving target defense to our solution for the benefit of Citrix customers who are dialed in here to this webinar. And you could just build it out and just hit it like two times. That should do it. What we do here with moving target defense innovation is two things. At the end of the application load time, our agent, which I'll get into in a little bit, is a DLL that appends itself to the Windows loader. It remaps the application memory space, and then it renames the DLL and hides it. All of this so the bad guys can't find it, right? Then we move the location. The second major step is we create a skeletonized version, right, of the original application memory space, which is the memory space that the bad guys think they need to attack. It's what they think they're going to attack. And then once they do, and we morph the memory, they automatically reveal themselves by default to be malicious, to be a bad guy, right? And the result is that the attack is prevented. And that's it, right? The attack is prevented. A notification is sent to the admin, could be IT or security, and then they know they've avoided being hit by something big. The fundamental concept behind this, again, with moving target defense, allows us to be fully preventative, where we can prevent zero-day attacks, unknown attacks. We don't require prior knowledge of that attack to be successful in preventing it. This gives us a deterministic point of view where we eliminate false positives for customers, right? And it gives customers an element of resilience, right? Changing the economics of the attack, changing the way that you're defending yourself and you're defending your business. And the reality is we work very well next to other solutions. I know I've kind of hit on sort of, where other solutions aren't as effective. It's because they aren't. It's because they need us next to it. All right, we can go to the next slide. So what does this mean for us? So remember when earlier in the presentation when I talked a little bit about the fact that most cybersecurity solutions tend to introduce complexity and potentially a little clunkiness and network performance, produce a lot of false positives. Moving target defense in and of itself, based on that last slide, I can probably understand that you might be thinking that's a little complex. And the reality is that IP is a very meticulously crafted innovation. The difference is that at Morphisec, we've figured out a way to apply it to deliver a solution rather that's easy and lightweight. It's one that IT, you as members of the IT team and your CIO will love, right? And it's also the solution that we find in multiple situations. And I'm kind of chuckling about this. Is that if you could just go back one more time, is that security guys are always guys within the enterprise who love to say no. So what does this mean for the environment? Well, our platform aligns as fully integrated into the Citrix ecosystem, which means our agent can install on devices and hosts, and unlike other solutions, protects what Sagnik referred to earlier, the user, right? The user is often, potentially one layer removed from the browser, right? And as a result, this is susceptible to attacks that end up moving laterally onto devices, right? So our stack, it's a 1 meg DLL agent. It's a management server, and it's scalable to the largest environments across physical, virtual, or hybrid-based environments. So we'll get into a little bit more, but we can go to the next slide. The value that we deliver is enormous to security teams, and we've hit a little bit on some of the security message so far and the actual benefit there. But it really starts with the ability to prevent rather than to go threat hunting, which I mentioned earlier. What threat hunting is continuously monitoring for threats and then figuring out as you're monitoring and letting threats execute to a certain extent, figuring out how to respond to it. What this requires in terms of other endpoint telemetry is a persistently running agent that collects and stores a lot of data. And across enterprise environments and across multiple devices, it's highly problematic for IT and security, both to try to make sense out of a lot of this white noise that's coming in and to even get the tool up and running, right? Because usually they require a lot of tuning. So Morphisec is really the exact opposite, focusing on being operationally simple to security teams and then letting technology like antivirus handle some of the known stuff, right? We're purpose-built to reduce false positives at the end of the day. So if you jump to the next one, basically, we're looking at extending that value. This is what customers say to us all the time, right? Beyond security and into the realm for us and for you as Citrix customers, we're an extremely we're an extremely valuable layered option in VDI environments, right? As a ubiquitous protection layer. What we do hear from customers over and over is that they can't afford to install solutions that can't function across Citrix. What makes us valuable to our customers in this use case is that we install seamlessly and we start protecting quickly, right? This gives IT teams peace of mind that business continuity is prioritized and not compromised. We can jump to the next. So again, why Morphisec for virtual desktop? So there's three things that I want to point out here, which is essentially, number one, no CPU load. This is critical to maximize the number of applications across the environment that are supported by the Citrix server. In other words, as environments scale and grow, Morphisec can scale and grow next to it. Number two is an improved user experience, right? That's important for the adoption of VDI and virtual environments. The biggest thing you need to know about Morphisec is we don't get in the way of allowing for pooled sessions to start and work immediately. We're not in the way of that process. Further, no updates, right? No software updates to the Morphisec technology. And it really is not so much no software updates and the process that accompanies that. It's really no updates in the sense that there's no repository to update. In other words, there's no signatures, there's no patterns, there's no behaviors. We're not looking for something specific. Again, we're morphing and remapping the memory space, right? And this is particularly important for in a pooled or potentially a non-persistent environment where every login updates from scratch, right? So because you don't have to update the Morphisec technology, you don't have to worry about anything because we're still protecting in the layers and areas rather in the infrastructure where you need protection. Okay, we can jump to the next. So basically what we wanted to do was I wanted to come back to what Sagnik already pointed out earlier, which is, securing this workspace is essential, right? And the three pillars of this clearly are control, visibility, and intelligence. I'll focus on control here, right, for Citrix customers, right, as it relates to simplifying security to augment the tools that are already built into Citrix. Administrators literally don't have to take on any more management of another tool with Morphisec. And as I'll point out in a couple of use cases coming up, because our focus is on fileless, targeted, and deliberate attacks, we can focus on people, right? We talked a little bit earlier about people-centric security. which by nature reduces the attack surface from a singular focus on devices only. We in turn can then centralize our approach on supporting VDI. And we can jump to the next. So what I want to show here is the diagram that we have here of the Citrix ecosystem, right? And where Morphisec specifically fits into the VDI infrastructure. If you can just build it a little bit there, the reality, what we'll see here, and I think we all know this from a security standpoint, right? There's not a silver bullet for every threat. That said, we do believe that your CIO will appreciate the added coverage that Morphisec can deliver within your Citrix environment as part of this layered approach to securing the digital workplace. So our software, which is agent-based, but we call it the Protector. It installs on laptops, servers, which we consider endpoints. We also protect users, as you can see here in the control column, right? Not just devices, right? As part of that people-centric strategy to defending the enterprise. What this means is that a user on a device might be accessing resources via a VDI machine or browser-based apps. Essentially, as these become sessions, we don't really care if it's a pooled session or not. We protect that instance across that session. So you'll see right here how Morphisec is deployed also at the host and in the hybrid cloud layer. In addition, what we can do is we can prevent the threats across these specific areas of the overall Citrix infrastructure. You'll notice also that our console resides in the management layer so that you can manage your Morphisec deployment across your Citrix deployment. So now I'll jump into the first customer case study here. And if you just build out the benefits on the side, I'm just going to touch on these for a couple of minutes and hit on some of the highlights here, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that anybody attending this webinar and anybody who's a Citrix customer will look at this as something that they can relate to. So we've got a private credit card company who's been a customer for a while that's got 3,000 VDIs, right? Needed extremely lean endpoint security controls, right? They looked at every technology that was out there. They needed to get up and running quickly, and they needed to complete this without adding staff resources, right? Which we talked a little bit earlier about not needing more management in general of controls that you're bringing up. The requirement was also no performance issues. They had zero tolerance for any performance issues on VDI. And essentially, we were able to deliver with no degradation of performance. We can go to the next one. Again, another joint customer that we have here for customer case study 2 is essentially a bank based in Hong Kong, right? Where they've got close to 2,000 endpoints, specific endpoints that needed secure mail access via Internet Explorer based on their security policy on XenApp, right? But the problem is they experienced a rash of ransomware attacks. And again, there was also zero tolerance for any performance impact on their VDI environment, right? And what we see a lot of times is that a 3-person team, which is not that many for a security team, they don't have any cycles. That's not resources that can really be allocated for a full-on, full-blown security operations center. Furthermore, what we do hear from customers often is that they don't have a tolerance for business disruption, right? So when you're thinking about the disruption of business, that's lost dollars, right? And for a bank, and even here for customer case study number 3, which is a stock exchange, absolutely no tolerance for that, right? Security, the way that we've architected it at Morphisec, is starting to become more of a business-oriented technology, right? And we want to enable business. We don't want to prevent business. We want to prevent attacks and enable business at the same time. So the stock exchange here, really focused on ATPs, right? Advanced threat protection, and they were looking at tons of attacks coming at them. They are a high performance organization and needed the availability of Zendesk and ZenApp as a critical business application for their traders, right? So they couldn't have any disruption to what the traders were trying to do on the stock exchange. Think about the number of transactions that would entail. It's massive. So as you can see, we work, our technology maps directly into VDI, and it maps directly into the needs of organizations who are becoming more agile and more mobile and how they do business. And that's it for me. I'm going to kick it now over to Yuval Danieli, who will actually demo the MorphSec solution and make good on on essentially what I've teed up for him and show you exactly how it works from threat to remediation. Yuval.
Thank you, Tom. Excellent start for my part. Thank you, everybody. My name is Yuval Danieli, Customer Services VP. And today, what we have is using my thin client, as you can see here. Somewhere in the world, I log into my Citrix desktop, which is hosted on Azure, protected by MorphSec Endpoint Threat Protection, ETP as we call it, which in turn is connected to a management server hosted in AWS. Really a multi-cloud environment, which also shows the great synergy between both solutions. Citrix Zen line of products provides an effective way to stream and manage resources to users, while ATP adds an efficient layer of protections on those resources. And as we can see here, it has a very small footprint on the system, has 0 CPU while not working, simple to deploy and operate, and very minimal use of resources. Make it ideal for those type of installation. And as you see, in idle, there is no consumption. And when I open Outlook, for example, you can see that there is a little bit jump of resources and then again running back down to 0. Again, consuming very, very little of resources and more important, ready to work immediately as the machine is ready. And it doesn't need, as Tom said, it doesn't need to get updates. It doesn't need to get connected to a server or to any cloud for downloading any configurations or signatures. Or doesn't need to have any other prior knowledge in order to operate at the moment that instance kicks in, which again making it ideal for non-persistent and or pooled machines. Now, before we go into the attack, I just want to show that this today is a real attack that was captured, and it is a real spear phishing attack from a real campaign, which was specifically designed to bypass security solutions. Has several tricks, which I'll show you later about how to evade those network devices, antiviruses, sandboxing, and of course, the main vulnerability, the user itself. So let's start showing those. So I received a mail today, and as you can see, it usually comes from trusted source, someone I trust, my teacher, my neighbor, a real authority, United States, and I click the mail and I see here, sorry, let me open it, and I see something that looks okay, not suspicious. And of course, like any other user, I will open it, right? And again, you can see here on the right the very little amount of resources that this protector is taking in order to work. Now, of course, as any other user, and I'm not different from anyone, I'll do enable editing. Nothing happens so far, so I said enable contact. Of course, I want to see what happened. And at that point, nothing happens. But here comes the trick number one. There is a macro inside that actually is designed to start working when I close the document, not when I open it. So again, trick number one is to evade sandboxing, is to start working when I close. Nobody is expecting that. And that's basically here. I just show it to you here on auto close, and we can see the macro here, edit, and I see here nothing. Again, here is trick number two. Trick number two is to evade the user from not really understand what's going on. So I want to show you trick number two and trick number three. So let me just close this here, and I'll show you the trick. First of all, if you can see the long line here, for the untrained eye, it looks like gibberish. Okay, a script running. But when you look at that, you understand how genius it is. First, this long line of gibberish is designed to hide the operational section, the real malicious section, from the user. And this is everything here. Now we we ran it, of course, and we decipher it. And what you see, this is the script itself. So first of all, it runs something very legitimate called PowerShell. Every machine in Windows machine has a PowerShell, and it runs it in hidden and try to do other things. In the end, what it does, it takes runs file and find and replace, and this is the real gibberish. As you can see, these are real command and control center, or as we call them, C2, which the script will go try to download the payload, the malicious payload from, and after doing that, we'll save it somewhere, and also will change it to be executable. So very evasive attack. And now let's try to execute it, and let's see what we have here. So I'm going to close the document, and let's keep an eye on this attack. Let me move it a little bit, sorry. I just want to enlarge this so we can all see. And now I'm going to close. As you remember, at this point of time, sandboxes, antiviruses all went to sleep. And as I see, I here have the Outlook, and I see the WinWord underneath, and I'm closing that. And I see that the PowerShell that you spoke before is executing. And I see a file called temp running. And again, now I see Morphisec Protector reported malicious activity. That's the way the activity or the protector is working. Again, in runtime, without disruption to the user, and stopping only the malicious activity, because everything before that might have been legitimate. We don't want to stop it, don't want to delay it. And on the other end, as we will see later, this obfuscation is something that designed to evade all those signatures and behavioral and other sandboxing devices. So let me jump to our management system. Again, this is hosted in this scenario in AWS. Again, and it is designed to be simple. It is designed to give you the relevant information with the less amount of clicks needed in order for the administrator to perform his task, either be operational or be security. So what we have here, the dashboard, you see how many attacks have been stopped, and you see how many connectors you have or protectors you have alive, and you can see trends. Let me jump directly to the attacks, which is of course what we care today. And let's see here the attack that was stopped. I see all other information, but more importantly, I see here this attack. And I can see also the evasion. And I see that I may have trending attack in the organization because I see all kind of strange things. Now, before we dive directly into the attack and see what we see in the console, there are two important points. One of them is this screen called attacks, not called alerts, it's not called events, it is called alert attacks. And we send only attacks that were prevented. So again, minimize the burden on the SOC or security teams. They don't have to search through thousands of alerts, correlate millions of events. They get the attack ready on a silver plate, telling them here is an attack that was prevented. Second, I immediately see the high level of picture of attacks. Again, no more thousands of unimportant pieces of information, or maybe they will be imported after that, but currently I have this attack. And clicking on that, I get the most important information that I can use. First of all, I see where it is. I see where the file, the culprit or the malicious file is, and I see the signature. All these, if you think on 0 day, are valuable like a gold, because then you can take this information and feed your other solutions in order to prevent this from reoccurring. So that's basically what we have now, because I want to leave some time for questions. But again, the product is simple to operate, gives you the amount of information that you need in less burden on you, with efficient way, very minimal, but minimal in a good way, with the relevant information. And if there is a need, there is more information. If you have malware researchers, we have a complete log that holds a lot of information that people really, malware researchers can, or very trained people can understand, but the regular person, the security administrator, IT administrator, can immediately take action on that without waiting for some SOC to come back to them a week later with some analysis. And with that, I would like to return the presentation to Tom or to Sagnik. Thank you.
Sure, thank you, Yuval. Sagnik, I'll kick it over to you so we start to wrap up the presentation.
Yes, thanks, Tom. Thanks, Yuval. And as Yuval presented, advanced attacks can be tricky, but if you have an endpoint security solution such as MorphiSec, there are high chances that your organization remains secure under the secure digital parameter that Citrix builds. The demo was showcased from a Citrix Cloud account, and the resources was hosted on Azure that could be located anywhere in the world. So. And I wanted to touch base on the hardening best practices that Citrix recommends from now that you have got a chance to understand what security solution, like how we approach security and how MorphiSec adds in that extra mileage to your security story. This is a guide that our Citrix consultants has built for organizations, I do want to mention that user education is key. People need to understand that somewhat, be suspicious of links, attachments, understand that zip files and executables should be looked at more carefully. And however people want to do their work, they are trained to do their work, and there will be people uh, that click on things that should not be clicked on, and we can't hold that against them. But it is something that should be part of the security program. And I know that a lot of organizations, a lot of IT, uh, there's simply not enough time in the day to do an assessment and remediation of these kind of hardening requirements. They're like, don't run applications or desktops in administration mode. These are the basic things that we recommend our admins, like disable macros and active content, moving from blacklisting to whitelisting, sandboxing the email client and browser, and so forth. But so I do want to mention that Citrix Professional Services has an assessment hardening assessment tool, and it's called the Digital Workspace Security Assessment. It looks at vulnerabilities, redundancies, and best practices that we are talking about in this best practices guide for your digital workspace. And you can also inspect your endpoint risk with the Smart Core control and the Smart Access feature of Netscaler Gateway and XenApp, and so forth. So we'll share the links of these hard practices guides. And Tom, do you want to add in some more points from how Morphisec sees these guides, and how do you recommend customers for a better security?
Sure, absolutely. I just wanted to wrap up by basically saying, Sagnick, thank you very much for the opportunity today for Morphisec to present. We hope this is helpful for Citrix customers, and we're finding more and more joint customers out there in the field. So I think that it's really it's a solid partnership that we're building, and we're really working toward mapping exactly what we do to aligning with the fabric of the Citrix ecosystem, mainly XenApp and XenDesktop. So I think that, again, last thing I would say is for customers, a layered approach is probably sometimes a little bit, you might think that it's a little bit more cumbersome than it is. And I can assure you that with Morphisec, you saw how easily you've all demonstrated the product and showed that exactly at what stage the attack comes in, and exactly what we deliver in terms of a preventative control, a highly preventative control at that happens quickly across the ecosystem. So that we hope that we certainly win more customers with you guys, and certainly our any Citrix customer automatically gets a discount with anything, any technology from Morphisec. So I just wanted to kind of point that out, and we hope that you do connect with us on that. Other than that, I'll turn it over to you, and maybe there's, it looks like we've got about 2 minutes left, so maybe there's a question or two that we can answer.
Yeah, so there are a couple of questions that's coming, and I'll quickly ask it over, Tom, and you can answer that. So, like, what's the difference between a Morphisec does and what antivirus does?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question, and I'll go back to one thing that I noted in the presentation, which is we don't require two things. One, Morphisec doesn't require any prior knowledge of any attack. The difference is antivirus requires all prior knowledge of every attack, right, to be successful and to be effective, right? Because all they're doing is applying signatures to known attacks. What we focus on are the highly advanced fileless attacks, highly targeted campaigns against organizations that are out in the wild and that haven't been seen before by the detection engines that organizations have deployed currently in their security operations center. So the difference is we're talking about maybe not that antivirus can't defend an organization against advanced attacks, but they attacks like you've all showed are specifically architected to evade a lot of detection engines, right? And when they can't see how we are able to get visibility into that attack and stop it immediately before it executes, that's what really sets the solutions apart.
Mm-hmm. And does Morphisec know what type of attack is trying to hit a system?
Right. So we gather a substantial amount of information, as you saw from the attack log that Yuval give the audience a little bit of visibility into. But yes, we can tell you most times with certainty exactly what that attack was, whether it was something that was caused by the vulnerability between Meltdown and Spectre, or if it was something that was like a Petya or a not Petya attack in the ransomware category. We cover everything from ransomware to remote access Trojans to specifically targeted banking Trojans even. So we'll be able to give you information and a high degree of deterministic intelligence on exactly what that looks like.
I'll take two more questions, Tom, and you can quickly answer that. And no, we're extending over time. If I install Morphisec within the VDI environment, how can I know how to protect a user, not just an endpoint?
Sure, that's a good question too. And what I would say is, taking a page out of the Citrix approach to SDP, it comes down to people, right? And people are being attacked as much as an actual component of the infrastructure is. But because people are on endpoints and they're interacting with data on endpoints, most times in a careless way, right? Especially if they're not security conscious, which most employees are not. That's where you run into issues, right? And so across the VDI ecosystem, the VDI infrastructure, specifically XenApp and XenDesktop, if there's a user on a device who's accessing resources, right, that ultimately is going to create a session, right? And that session can be hijacked, right? We protect in that instance, as we noted in one of the use cases in the presentation, we'll protect that instance, we'll protect that session as much as we'll protect the device. So we basically put a comprehensive wrapper around everything from the device, the host, the user, right? And almost regardless of what that environment is. So that is really how we protect the user, who could potentially be on multiple devices within the organization.
And from an IT standpoint, why is your technology a better fit for VDI environment?
Well, we've architected it to fit right into the VDI environment because we know that the trend is headed that way. So we install on the endpoint itself, but we can protect within the environment, right? Because you don't have to update, right? You don't have to update our software. And essentially, when you don't have to update that software, it really comes down to a couple of things, right? Number one, you're protected in between patch gaps, for one. Number two, you don't have to just be a sitting duck in a static way and detect attacks. You're simply preventing against it, right? And what I would also say is, number three, let me think about that a little bit. Number three, I think it's not so much about the software really, but and that process that it entails, but it's that there's no additional back-end database, right? There's no additional repository, right, that has to be queried out in the cloud of signatures, or even an open source signature source like VirusTotal, right? There's no patterns, there's no behaviors that are being relied upon. We just don't need prior knowledge, right? So we just prevent it. We work quickly, we work simply, and I think that really is the advantage of the Morphisec tech over anything else that could potentially be positioned as being architected for VDI.
Thank you. I mean, that's. I think there are some more questions, but I will be shortage of time. We'll definitely get back to the rest of the questions on private email. I see many of attendees have asked about the slides and recording, so for that we'll be sending out an email. So you're no worries on that. With that said, we are about to end today's webinar. I want to take a moment and thank our speaker, Tom, and Yuval for fantastic presentation and demo and engaging our audience and sharing these great insights with us. I hope this presentation has helped you make a better security choice. And last but not the least, I want to thank each one of you who are attending our webinar today, the Citrix Ready Technical Webinar Series, and this shall conclude our broadcast. Thank you so much.
Sagdev, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sagdev.